On February 26th, Malka Simkovich left her house in Chicago and passed a car adorned with Palestinian and Hamas flags. The drivers had their windows halfway down and were wearing Hamas's green headbands. They were laughing and yelling, though she could not hear what they were saying. Mind you, Malka lives in a neighborhood with many Jewish residents, including Holocaust survivors. Can you imagine what it is like for a Jew in 2024 to look outside their own home and see a flag that symbolizes the rape and genocide of the Jewish people? Can you imagine what it is like for a Jew to see these things and know that it is pointless to call the police? Anti-Semitism is, of course, just another day in Jewish history. We have witnessed it for centuries, a disgusting scourge that finds a way to reopen time and again. But when it comes to the Palestinians and their Arab and Muslim partners, we are not just talking about another day in Jewish history. We are talking about some of the most virulent Jew hatred you can imagine. Across the Arab and Muslim worlds, anti-Semitism is used as some crazed abstract system for making sense of a broken world that does not subscribe to their fundamentalist Muslim ideals. Fundamentalist Muslims do not just oppose Israel. They have called the Jewish state things like a sinister, unclean, rabid dog of the region, whose leaders look like beasts and cannot be called human. In Gaza, Muslim preachers regularly spew nauseating anti-Semitism, such as one who said, quote, "Our doctrine in fighting the Jews is that we will totally exterminate them. We will not leave a single one of them alive because they are alien usurpers of the land and eternal mercenaries." End quote. This sort of anti-Semitism thrives where there are not any Jews. Not a person, but an idea. The Jew is a unique carrier of transcendent evil, a pollution, a stain, a dark force responsible for the failures of others, the unconscious shame and primeval urges they feel in themselves, and everything that needs explaining, according to famed U.S. columnist David Brooks. This is a form of derangement, a flight from reality even in otherwise sophisticated people. In the Palestinian territories, such propaganda is indoctrinated in children from very young ages, as they are taught the supreme value and various methods of killing Jews. In United Nations schools, mosques, and other government-sanctioned venues, they learn to glorify hatred and nurture violence. In summer camps, they teach kids how to fire automatic weapons and kidnap Israelis. If you think this is not ludicrous enough, both Palestinian governments, Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, literally incentivize terrorism against Israelis. That's right. If you commit a terror attack against Israelis and are jailed for it in Israel, you will receive a monthly salary from one of these Palestinian governments, and your family will also receive monthly stipends. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, Hitler's Mein Kampf, and other timeless hateful publications are translated into Arabic and updated with new editions, to the point that a healthy majority of the public is thoroughly convinced Zionists are pure filth who ought to be unsoiled from Palestine. But it does not end in the Palestinian territories. We know virulent anti-Semitism exists within a variety of social institutions across Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and other Arab and Muslim majority states. Certainly this is nothing new to Israelis. We have seen this game played many times before, and we knew it was only a matter of hours after the bloodiest day in Israeli history, October 7th, that the Palestinians and their Arab and Muslim partners, as well as Russia, would unleash their virulent anti-Semitism, disguised as anti-Zionism and anti-Israel, across the world. Even then, the Palestinians did not even try to cover up their October 7th mischief, but instead decided to record it on body cams and disseminate the footage on social media. They even reportedly invited photographers from the Associated Press, New York Times, and CNN to photograph these atrocities in real time, so these photojournalists could send their footage to these outlets in the form of news media. Michael Oren, a former Israeli ambassador to the United States who's worked on issues in Gaza, said of the Palestinians' abhorrently unapologetic and celebratory anti-Semitism, "There is ritual to it, bloodlust and theater. In contrast to the Nazis, who understood that the Holocaust was stressful work for its perpetrators,
and that images of its conduct might shock even the most Jew-hating Germans, Hamas and other jihadist groups enjoy their job and assume that a great many others will applaud them. The Nazis sought to hide the evidence of their genocide. Hamas posted it on Facebook and Telegram. It's difficult to imagine the citizens of Dresden, say, handing out candy and setting off fireworks after the liquidation of the Lodz ghetto in 1944. Not so the Palestinians after virtually every major terrorist attack, their celebrations reaching a frenzy on October 7th. Hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, followed Hamas terrorists through the breaks in Israel's fence and carried out atrocities no less horrific.
And it does not end with their belligerently barbaric attacks on innocent Israelis. They seek opportunity after opportunity to defecate the existence of Israel, and, by extension, the Jews, with some of the purest lies, fabrications, and deceit. I am not talking about sinister forms of media that overtly encourage people to distrust Jews, overemphasize so-called Jewish bodily features, or portend that we so cleverly control the world. Sure, those are other unfortunate versions of anti-Jewish propaganda, but compared to the Palestinians' tactics, they make the Nazis look, at worst, like a perturbed friend of the Jews. Take, for example, when Palestinian authorities reported on October 17th, 10 days after the fighting began, that Israel attacked a hospital, allegedly killing some 500 people. Within minutes, thousands of notable media outlets, many Arab and Muslim majority countries, organizations like the anti-Semitic United Nations and others, politicians, political puppets, thought leaders, and influencers took this Palestinian propaganda and ran with it to the moon and back, 1,402 times. In Israel, even as the Israel Defense Forces immediately announced it was conducting an investigation, we recognize this all too familiar way of doing business. For years, Palestinian terrorists have been killing their own people, either purposely, accidentally, or a combination of both, and then manipulate these tragedies into an anti-Israel, anti-Jewish libel. And oh, what a libel this was. Some days later, howls of outrage swept across the news media and social media after the Israeli military struck an ambulance in Gaza, since it was being used in that moment by Hamas terrorists to transfer weapons. Instead of condemning the Palestinians for turning every single humanitarian asset into a tool of war, as author Aviva Klampus put it, the news media and social media quickly scolded the Israelis for doing what Israel has told everyone, from day one of this war, what it was planning to do, and what the United States and many other countries have openly supported, freeing the Gaza Strip of Hamas, an unthinkably dangerous Islamic jihadist organization. To understand this inexplicable insanity, you have to understand that the Palestinians and their partners are playing a much different and much more effective game than the Nazis and other historical Jew haters. Whereas the Nazis, for example, tried to create a subhuman and untrustworthy image of Jews in German society, and eventually across Europe, the Palestinians and their partners want to fight the Jews because they know that much of the world will remain silent, ambivalent, and apathetic to these wars. Take, for example, all the university administrators who have either said nothing or nothing meaningful about the Palestinian attack on Israel, on Jews mostly, and the blatant anti-Semitism, both in rhetoric and in action, that has subsequently erupted on their campuses. Why is that? Are all these highly distinguished academic administrators also on the anti-Semitic spectrum, ranging from passive and complicit to violent and lethal? Or is there something else going on here? According to a study published in 2022 by the National Association of Academics in the United States, a study that did not attract much attention at the time, the Qataris donated $4.7 billion to U.S. universities starting in 2001, precisely after the September 11th attacks. The recipients, however, did not report part of the money received, as required by law. What has been transpiring on the campuses of these universities and others since the war's outbreak is a multi-participant, multifaceted strategy that is now coming to fruition at the so-called right moment. In the weeks since the October 7th attacks by Palestinians in Israel, more Jewish and Israeli students across the United States have said that they fear for their safety in the face of the culture of anti-Semitic demonstrations and events, which are becoming increasingly violent. These demonstrations and events have gone well beyond the boundaries of progressive concepts that flourish on campuses. Historically, universities are homes to free speech and critical thinking, but the speed with which the demonstrations are organized and the availability of resources for them raise questions like those that arose in recent days in London, where demonstrations feature huge quantities of Palestinian flags that were quickly distributed to thousands of participants. Without realizing it, or by realizing but presuming that these are harmless demonstrations, major Western universities and cities have become hotbeds of anti-Semitism. This might be the reason why anti-Zionism agendas have intellectualized and rationalized anti-Semitism on college campuses by dressing up centuries-old Jew hate in modern-day academia with sexy terms like liberation and resistance, and by attempting to rewrite much of the Israeli, Palestinian, and Middle East history, or purposely editing out certain parts. And this is exactly what so many Arabs and Muslims aspire to engender, that Jews across the world will feel tremendously fearful and intimidated through the vehicle of Israel. Hence why the unspeakable Palestinian attacks on October 7th in Israel were in actuality attacks on all Jews across the world. Israeli Jews just happened to be the so-called lowest hanging fruit. And what makes these attacks so bothersome is that they were not just political. As many people have pointed out, if the Palestinians just wanted their own state, Hamas would not have pursued this path, and the Palestinian Authority would not have decided to stay quiet rather than condemn these atrocities. In addition to being political, these attacks were also ethnic, racial, religious, and ideological, a combination that makes Nazi Germany anti-Semitism pale in comparison in some ways. The only reason why so many Arabs and Muslims with their 22 Arab states and 49 Muslim-majority countries have not systemically killed 6 million Jews or more is because the Jews now have our own real refuge, the State of Israel. Had these Arab and Muslim-majority countries not expelled the vast majority of their Jews leading up to and after Israel's founding in 1948, who knows what they would have done to the more than 1 million Jews living there? Fortunately, many of these Jews immigrated to Israel, where they, together with other Israelis, created an intelligence agency called the Mossad. For those who do not know, it is this very Mossad that has departments which look after Jews and Jewish communities across the world. Just a few weeks ago, the Mossad helped thwart an attack against Jews in Brazil. I wish more Jews across the world, as well as our non-Jewish family and friends, would realize just how critical the State of Israel is to the Jewish people's safety and survival, wherever we are on this planet. Because there are nearly 2 billion Muslims seemingly everywhere. It goes without being said that every Muslim does not hate Jews and want to kill us. But a small percentage of a massive number is not fear-mongering. It is math.